Today, I want to give you the good news that the ritual that I performed and wrote on previous Saturday, it actually worked. Now, in some cases, some of those rituals may work a little bit too well, and I'm going to get into it once we get into the mid part of the video. I performed the ritual on a Saturday, and the ritual was specifically performed on that day because Saturday is dominated by the planet Saturn. Saturn is the planet that deals with karmic consequences. And in my case, because I've been under spiritual attack for several years, having actually Saturn involved in a time where we see a lot of Saturn influence in our planetary outlook, I think that was the best strategy. Now, I'm going to get also into a little bit of what happened to me throughout the years when it comes to spiritual attacks. In any case, when you do a ritual, if you're not exactly in the right phase of the day and the phase of the moon and the planetary phase and the right hour, if you get into ceremonial magic, you will find that you're told to perform specific rituals at specific times within the day, at a specific lunar phase, at a specific solar phase, and such. But in reality, the reason why you can get around that is that the space-time, from a metaphysical perspective, is a continuum. When you consider that the space-time is a continuum, you can actually borrow from specific points between the space-time without necessarily being at the right time and the right place. So, and I believe it requires a little bit of a skill. I still like the idea that, for instance, if you're performing a ritual on a Thursday, that's the planet Jupiter that reigns that specific day, and therefore I'm going to tailor it towards Jupiterian kind of effects. So Jupiter deals with leadership, for instance. Today's focus of this video is going to be on the concept of spiritual warfare. Because if you come from a Wiccan perspective, what you could probably think is that every time you do a ritual that could potentially harm somebody, that harm is going to come back to you threefold. The problem exists when the other side is truly trying to harm you. If the other side is truly trying to harm you, then the effects of the ritual, the karmic consequences of the specific ritual shouldn't exist, because you're using magic, you're using your own faculties, what you're capable of doing to protect yourself. Now, the concept of spiritual warfare is really old. It's generally associated with Christianity. Christianity believes that there is a spiritual warfare between the forces of evil and the forces of God, and that by the end of times, the two forces will collide and eventually God will prevail. In a more esoteric, mystical perspective, the spiritual warfare is happening every day. And you don't have to see it the same way the Christian philosophy sees it. You can actually interpret spiritual warfare as every single action that essentially is taking you away from your true path. So we're all here for specific reasons. We're all here because we're meant to fill some kind of role. We generally, when we incarnate on Earth, we tend to act accordingly to specific archetypes. So some people will act more like the leader, and some people have more of the artistic perspectives. Some people are more of the religious figure. Some people are more laissez-faire, and perhaps they will appear like the fool in the tarot, right? So many of us come for different reasons, and we have our path that can be essentially already determined. If we're meant for a specific path with specific gifts that we got to use with specific things, the universe will send you distractors, and the distractors are sent there on purpose to guide you away from the true path. The goal of the distractor is to essentially make you change course when you were meant to go straight. So the universe also is in place, guidance that can keep you moving forward. So in that case, the spiritual warfare is more about yourself and what's within you than what's on the outside. There is still a case that has to be made, and is the fact that when we practice magic, many of us practice magic for different reasons. And if somebody is truly after vengeance, and you can go online and find multiple rituals that are considered dark magic and are used to get revenge on somebody or make sure that somebody's suffering for some reason. So for that reason, because those rituals exist, they've been written, they're being used, and that's the reason why there is a market for it, you could potentially be a victim of a spiritual attack. And in that case, we can extend spiritual warfare. It's not just what's happening within you, but it's also what's coming from the outside. And because we are manifesting the reality around ourselves every day, what's coming from the outside is actually what we're generating through our own creation process. Either way, it's always a good idea to put walls, and many times use more as a redirecting energy. Once energy is made, it stays there. It can be transformed into something else, but that's a difficult process. But many times if the energy is there and you are incapable of transforming it, you can send it back. The reason why you wouldn't want to, for instance, capture the energy of somebody who's sending a negative attack towards you and transfer it into an inanimate object, such as a crystal, that's still not a good idea, because from a universal perspective, the crystal, the object, whatever we capture the energy in, wasn't responsible for the energy in the first place. So the justification behind a protection or a binding spell or anything that could reflect the energy backward towards that individual is that the energy was already created. You may not have the time or ability or energy to transform it into something positive, and therefore you're redirecting. And that's one method. It's really easy. Because it exists, you can actually use it, but essentially this will be step one. Step two is a little bit of a more elevated function. And for step two, when I use it, I like to work with two elementals and two figures, two archetypes. One is Mother Earth, and the other one is the archetype of Christ. When I work with Mother Earth, and I showed you this meditation before, first of all, I close my eyes and I breathe in, breathe out at least 3 times, just to make sure that I'm in a new space, in a new headspace. Then I can imagine roots that go out from my feet all the way down to the ground. And as I said previously, you imagine energy that comes up. It's green energy coming from the core of the earth, going into your limbs, your trunk, your upper limbs, your head, and now you're filled with it. At the same time, you can also breathe white light coming in. So as you breathe in white light, you carry green energy from the core of the earth, and then as you breathe out, you push the negative energy. This can become as a smoke, as a cloud, and you can direct the negative energy into earth. So let's try again, one time. Breathe in. So when I'm redirecting the negative energy towards earth again, the reason why I'm doing it is that in my experience, I've had a vision with Mother Earth, and in this vision, I was feeling sick. My body was feeling very sick. and Mother Earth appeared to me as a tree, as a large tree. And what I did, I used my hands and feet to connect to the tree. And I was breathing together with the tree. And as I was breathing with the tree, the earth was taking away negative substances from my body, from my spirit, absorbing them and transforming them into something positive. And if you look at the scientific perspective behind this, what we know is that at the end of this trip around Earth, our bodies will essentially rot. So Earth will utilize the material that we consider contaminated and rotten and change it into nutrients for plants. So something that could be perceived as negative, in reality, turns out to be something really positive, because not only we're supporting plant life, but we're also supporting oxygen production. We're supporting the diet of herbivores, and because of that, we're supporting the diet of carnivores, and therefore we're supporting the entire circle of life. Because of that, you can actually, in your meditation, you can use Mother Earth as a way to take that energy and channel it, and turn it into something positive. It's a little bit hard to do. I feel it's much easier to just redirect, particularly for dealing with a strong attack, because many times the attacks that we receive come across as attachments, and many times these appear as spirits that will be attached either to your body or to your shadow, in a way very similar to possession. So because of that, many times redirecting the energy back to the sender is a good way to get rid of the spirit. Because if the spirit is strong enough, then you may try to direct it into Earth, but Earth may not be able to transform it because you may not be directing it the right way. So it's a little bit of a harder process. Generally, what I suggest a second method for anything that's minimal, many times across, when we walk across the street, or we go to work, or we go to a school environment, or even within your family, there may be cases of jealousy. Somebody may be looking at you and essentially sending the evil eye towards you. And that jealousy, although it's not intentional, it's not energy that you're creating intentionally, it's there. And you're the target. Because you're the target, that energy could affect your entire day. Now, if you practice this meditation several times a day, particularly if you feel you had a particularly negative encounter, you can actually get rid of a lot of that energy, because that jealousy, that quote unquote evil eye, doesn't necessarily come with something attached. Now, if you're using ceremonial magic and you're going to invoke some dark spirits and entities, that may attach to you, and therefore redirecting in that case may be the best idea. Now, if you're still unsure about this entire idea of spiritual warfare and redirecting energy because you feel that could affect you, let me tell you an anecdote from World War II. During World War II, the Germans were attacking the British, and the spiritualists within Britain were preparing counterattacks against the Nazis. And one of them was the Unfortunate, but the Unfortunate wasn't the only one. Many spiritualists, many circles will essentially go to the beach facing the coastline of continental Europe and perform the rituals. And in their rituals, they will try to stop the invasion. And I think this is a really good example, because when we think about World War II and what Germany represented at the time, if we have an idea of absolute evil, that was the German government at the time. But through spiritual warfare, we were essentially able to spiritually deal with it. And perhaps was also the right method, because across history, we know that leaders have always been helped by spiritualists or religious figures Everybody has some sort of religious leader or spiritual leader they go to. But in the case of Germany during World War II, it's particularly interesting the fact that the Germans were into esoteric practices as well. So many times when the British were defending themselves with techniques that were esoteric in nature, it was because some of the attacks that were coming from the Germans were also esoteric in nature. So essentially, you're using the same level of response when it came to those attacks. So I hope this was able to put everything a little bit more in perspective. The idea of spiritual warfare or sending something back to the sender or doing a binding spell is actually not that bad. You're essentially involved in making sure that you're protected and you're safe, and you're going to be using all of the methods available to you to do that. And therefore, these are techniques I highly suggest. I don't think they will be helpful in sending something unnecessary to somebody, but they will be really helpful to respond to some of the attacks you may receive.